This took place when I was touring Kenya, Africa, with my parents. We were in Masai Mara, one of the most famous savannas of Africa. We had lodged in a hotel in the savannah. The layout of the hotel was as follows. The main building was at a distance of some 1 kilometer from the lodging cabins. The cabins were amazing. They had a feel as if they belonged to the jungle itself. There was a river flowing behind the cabin, but it was out of bounds as it had crocodiles in it. But we got a good view of the river from the balcony of our cabin. It was great seeing crocs in their own habitat. The night we reached the hotel, we were all pretty exhausted. The room was cozy except for one weird thing. It had a deer's head hanging from one of its walls. The hotel was pretty old, so it must have been placed there before hunting was banned in Africa. There was a show of Mara people, tribals, that night which wouldn't take place for another month. As we were there only for 3 days, my parents went to the show. I decided to stay back as I was pretty tired, and the hotel was about 1 kilometer away. I was reading a book, but must have fallen asleep. I woke up about an hour later, which was pretty odd, as I never wake up at night once I sleep. My parents were not yet back, and as I rubbed my eyes, I swear I saw the deer's eyes move. I was completely freaked out and closed my eyes. After some time, I gave it up for an illusion and started to read again. This was when I noticed a pretty odd thing. The curtains of the room were moving as if there was a breeze coming from the windows, but the windows were closed. Suddenly, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I felt as if I was being watched. I felt a weird cold sensation and started praying. After a while, the feeling stopped. I kept a pendant of OM we had brought with me and tried to sleep. After some time, my parents returned. I didn't tell them about the experience, as I thought they would not believe me. The next day, I asked our guide, who had become a pretty good friend by then, about the experience. I thought he would know as he visited that place pretty frequently. He said that he didn't know anything about that, but I felt from his tone that he was hiding something from me. We went on a drive in the savannas and came back that evening in a pretty light mood. But when we reached our cabin, we found to our astonishment that our luggage had been scattered and messed up. We thought that the cleaner must have done it and complained to the hotel management, but they said that, as per their policy, the cleaners do not touch anything belonging to a customer. The receptionist also said that the cleaning was done under supervision. We let go of the incident as some misunderstanding. Then, the last and most eerie thing occurred. We were about to go to bed when we all heard someone knocking forcefully at the door. When we opened the door, there was no one. This happened 2, 3 times. Finally, fed up, we shouted to the person who was knocking to stop playing around. No answer. The knocking stopped. We gave it up as some prank and retired to bed. But it must have been about 2:30 in the morning, when I again heard the knocking, sleeping on an extra bed near the door, so I think I was the one who heard it. I was pretty scared to go out alone after my first experience, and we were even advised not to go out alone at night, as the area had many wild animals. So I woke my parents and told them about the knocking. At first, they told me that I was just getting paranoid and that I should go to sleep. But then, we all heard the knocks on the door. My dad opened the door only to find that there was no one there, but he saw something move in the bushes. He came in and declared that it was some kid. Though I didn't feel convinced, I decided that I would rather believe that it was a kid. Next day, we complained about this to the staff. They also said that it must have been some prankster, but then suddenly, my dad asked what moron would have let out a kid at 2 in the morning. That got me thinking. I started relating this to my previous experience and felt that the place was haunted. But anyways, we were to depart that day, so I didn't care much. I didn't think about the incident until the day we were about to leave Kenya. On the day of our departure, our guide told me he wanted to tell me something. He asked me not to tell anyone what he was going to tell me. I agreed. He told me about that hotel. He said that it was rumored that a leopard at the hotel killed a boy of about 9, 10 years, some 50 years or so ago. He said that everyone said that the ghost of the boy still haunted the same room where he was staying the night he died. He said that many of his customers had the same complaint as me, but only those customers who stayed in 2 specific rooms had the experience. It was in room number 153 and 154. I stayed in room number 154. My story begins in the company house that was consigned to our family by my father's job in Bostwana, Cameroun, in the 1990s. I was about 5 years of age when we moved in and about 11 or 12 years old when we left. I say that it was the beginning of the para-experiences by family members and myself, but in all honesty, I can account personal para-occurrences in my early childhood also. Although my experiences as a toddler were of a far more personal nature, I believe, as does each family member who resided there at that time, that the company house was haunted, in and of itself. Almost every family member who lived at this house can recount a ghost encounter, strange feelings, and bizarre experiences. It was late in the evening, anywhere between 8:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. GMT, and it was one of the only times that my brother and I were allowed to stay up late. Note, it is a bit difficult to describe the layout of the house, so I hope it will not hinder your ability to understand my story. My brother was a little bit older than me. About 2 years, he was about 8 years old, and I was maybe 6 years old. We were sitting on the floor in the center of our lounge, watching television, when we decided to go and get some blankets, as it was getting late and cold. We got up and went to the bedrooms to get our blankets. I was in front of him and wrapped the blanket over my shoulders, with its tail dragging at my feet. As I reached the lounge area, I looked over the couch to the sitting room, which had a dining table, some chairs, my hamster cage, and decorations. And sitting on the chair, as clear and in the physical as you and I, was a man with his chair turned towards the lounge area. He wasn't looking at us. Instead, he was writing in a book, and he seemed to be completely distant and withdrawn while conducting this task, as if in his own world. What also struck me was the way in which this picture was portrayed to us. The energy around him seemed to engulf the entire sitting room, as if we were to shout our very loudest, it would not penetrate the ball of energy surrounding it, nor would he hear or notice it. Now that I think about it, maybe this is what people mean when they refer to an impression. Well, I was so incredibly frightened that I did not speak a word and almost fell over, completely paralyzed with fear, to the ground. I covered my face as far as I could with the blanket and lay there with my back in the sitting room, trying in all ways not to draw further attention to myself. After a few seconds, I felt my brother lay down behind me, but I was still too scared to turn around. After a few seconds, with effort, I turned rigid and terrified to my brother. He was staring directly at me, his eyes wide with panic, as he struggled to grasp his breath, and then he said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yes," at which point we both sat up immediately and looked towards the sitting room. There was nothing there. Moreso, there was also no person sitting on the chair. I can't remember now, some 20 years later, if the chair was pulled out, but the sitting room, as I remember it, looked precisely the same, just without the man and the energy. When my brother and I discussed it later, he said that he had been walking behind me, and when he saw me glance to the sitting room, he had become curious as to what I was looking at. Upon looking at the sitting room, he had seen a man sitting on the chair, writing and clasping his hands together. We both described the man quite similarly to the WWF wrestler, The Undertaker, which I became familiar with a year or two after this event. He was wearing an all-black, with the exception of his t-shirt, a leather jacket, and he had long dark hair and pale skin. Despite this harrowing experience, I felt a connection with the WWF character, and I've been cheering The Undertaker on for the last 25 years, ever since I saw his ghost doppelganger when I was just a little girl. This story happened in Senegal, even before the following events occurred. I knew I was sensitive to something. I never knew what until now. I first knew when my granny fell ill with cancer. It was the second time she had been diagnosed, and her time was nearly done. It got to the point where my parents refused to let me visit her in the caring home because of the condition she was in. I would like to mention that my granny and I had a good friendship. She was like my best friend. One day, I was at my best friend's horse riding competition when I got this overwhelming sense of dread. That was when I knew something had happened. I called my mom frantically, but she wasn't answering the calls. When 5 minutes of calling, my mother answered the phone and told me not to worry and that everything was okay. When I returned later that night, my parents were waiting for me. The moment I felt that dread was the moment my granny passed to the other side. The second time I knew I was connected to something was in my apartment. At the time, I was 13 and was off school because I was ill. My mom and sister were in school. My mom is a teacher, and my dad was at work. At around 11-ish a.m., I heard footsteps in my living room. I thought it was my dad, so didn't think anything of it and went to sleep. Later on, that day when all my family were home, I asked why one of them came back around that time, and all of them said they didn't come home. This raised alarm, so we checked the CCTV footage from the camera outside, out-only entrance. It revealed that no one actually entered the house throughout the day, apart from when my parents and sister returned home from work after 3 p.m. I now live in a new villa in a new compound where the following events are taking place. I would also like to note that before I moved abroad to where I am now, I didn't experience dreaming. This will become important later on in the following series of events. The first event occurred on the 4th of December 2017. I woke up one morning to find a pair of handprints on a wooden panel that was too high up for me or the rest of my family, as well the maid that came once a week to reach. The handprints were also substantially large. I knew they had appeared overnight as they were positioned in an area that I looked at on a daily basis, meaning I would notice them if they were there before. This raised concern for my family, and I because my mom found a handprint on her skirt, which was hanging on the guest bedroom opposite my room. We checked CCTV, which covered all the entrances, exits to my house. No one was seen coming in or out of my house apart from my family. This is where it all began. The second event occurred on the 8th of December 2017. I just got back from a netball tournament, had a shower, dressed, and went downstairs. During the time I was in the shower, my parents went out with my sister, so when I went downstairs, I was home alone, and it was about 4 p.m. I remained downstairs until about 7 p.m. when I went upstairs to go to bed because I was tired after the tournament. My parents and sister were still out at this point. When I opened my bedroom door, I noticed that my lamp had moved around 90 degrees and my fan switch had been turned off. This shocked me because all 3 of my cats had all been shut out of my room. I checked as well to be 100%, which is why my door was shut. The fan switch always stays on because it ventilates my bedroom as well as my bathroom, and it is not on a timer. This switch is also stiff, and I struggle myself to switch it on sometimes. The switch had been on, and my lamp was in a different position to what it was before I left, bearing in mind I was the only one in the house. Who moved my lamp and turned the switch off? The third event happened on the following night, on the 9th of December 2017. I was lying in bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling when I noticed this mist-like thing, which was darker than the darkness circling around my ceiling. It started to drift down, slowing, nearing closer to my face. I was frozen, but not scared. It was almost a comforting presence. After it vanished, I was able to move again. I instantly grabbed my phone and put on the flashlight. Nothing was there. The next night, I left my door open before I fell asleep. I woke up at around 3 a.m., rolled over and saw my cat staring, but not at me. Winston, one of my 3 cats, was staring above me and did so for around 5 minutes. As I am only a teenager, I don't know much about the paranormal, but I have heard that cats are able to see things people can't. If you know more about this, please comment. Nothing happened for a few weeks until I was in my room revising whilst the rest of my family went shopping. I heard rustling of plastic bags coming from the kitchen. My parents had come back and were unpacking the shopping, so I went downstairs to help unpack like I normally do. However, when I entered the kitchen, my parents weren't there. I was home alone. This happened a few more times in the future, including clanging of pots and pans, as if someone was doing washing up. What all these events had in common was that no one was home. I went back to my home country for Christmas, and while I was there, I felt something negative, like someone or something was watching me sleep. It got to the point where I had to sleep with a light on. I am 16 years old and am a tough girl who doesn't get scared easily, so for me to feel this anxiety is a big thing. During the holiday, I inherited one of my grand's bracelets, the one who I mentioned previously, and I wear it every day. When I returned abroad from my holiday, I placed my bracelet and watch on the same shelf on the side of my bed, shut my bedroom door, and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I found that my watch had moved down to the second shelf. I asked my family if they had been in my room during the night or in the morning and moved anything. They all said no. The following few evenings, I heard the same familiar yet weird noise each night coming from the guest bedroom. That familiar noise being a light switch being flicked off and on repeatedly. One night, when the noise started up again in the guest bedroom, I decided to investigate. As I walked closer, the noise continued, however, as soon as I stepped foot in the guest bedroom. The noise stopped. I turned on the lights, and as expected, no one was there. Despite the noise being the flicking of a light switch, there were no flickers of light. What switch was being used? In upcoming days, the noise emigrated from the guest bedroom into my room. One night, I was sending my friend a voice note on WhatsApp about what was going on in the house, when I heard the same noise again, but louder. When listening back to the voice note, I discovered that the noise wasn't caught. The next time something happened was when I came out of the shower. As normal, my mirror was misted up, but then I realized that at the bottom left-hand corner of the mirror, there were 4 finger marks that had broken through the condensation, which was fresh. During the shower, no one came in because I would have heard them. Plus, my family never came into my room because they respect my space because I am 16. Even if they did come in unannounced, then why would they draw on my mirror? I haven't told them about all these paranormal events because they won't believe me, so it's not like they would be trying to wind me up because they have no idea in the first place. This also brings about the fact that I am the only one in the house that is feeling and having these experiences. Is the house haunted, or am I? Yet again, a few weeks go by with nothing happening, when one morning I wake up at 4 a.m. to the feeling of 2 fingers lightly stroking my neck. I can still remember how soft the fingers were and how gently they touched my neck. Once again, no one was there. I went away on holiday, and while I was away, nothing happened, and when I returned, everything had calmed down, so I thought. One night, I forgot to do my washing, and I needed a school shirt for the morning, so I went down to the laundry room at 10:30 p.m. when no one was awake. The laundry room is under the stairs and placed in the middle of the house. There are no windows near the laundry room, and the AC was off. After putting the washing on, I left the room thinking, shit. I should have turned off the lights and shut the door, but I had this intrinsic feeling that I shouldn't bother, so I walked up the stairs. After I stepped on the 4th step, I heard a huge bang. The laundry door had slammed shut. Weeks went by, and nothing had happened until I went to my friend's house. My friend also experiences some weird things in her home. However, nothing as big as what happened when I was there. Her parents had gone out drinking, so we were home alone. We were downstairs in her living room when we heard something being dragged upstairs. We stopped in our tracks and tried to explain what happened. Then we both stood still and just listened. We heard the dragging noise again, but this time it was louder and lasted longer. We looked at each other and then sprinted out of the house. We called her parents, and they came back to check the house because we were too scared to go back in. No one was in the house, and nothing had been misplaced. This is the part where dreams become important. I started to have these nightmares where I was someone else, not as in I acted unlike myself, but that I was in someone else's body. In each of these dreams, it was like I was seeing someone's last moments as I was being killed in all of them. This led on to me having dreams that came true. For example, one of my dreams predicted a TV show plot that I started to watch with my parents the day after the dream, and another one predicted me sorting things out with a person I had a fallout with. Is this coincidence, or did I really predict the future? Also, one night I suffered sleep paralysis. However, even to this day, I am not sure. During that night, I had 5 nightmares, which were all based in my bedroom, and in each of them, I was either getting dragged out of bed or getting attacked by something I couldn't see. Was I awake, or was I dreaming? A couple of days later, I got into bed around 10-ish p.m. and felt like someone or something was touching my left leg. It felt like it did in the dream. So I got my phone and filmed my leg with the flash on because my lights were off, and I wanted to see if there was a handprint. There was nothing, until I rewatched the video. In the video, you can clearly see a number of orbs flying towards my left leg. I myself am not a big believer in orbs. However, my AC unit is on the left side of my room and was on the most powerful setting, which means that if the orbs were dust, then they wouldn't be going towards my left, they would be going to the right, because that is where the AC is pointing. I have the video, but don't know how to post it. If you are interested in seeing this, then comment, and I will try my best to send it to you. Nothing happened for a week or so until I came home from school. I come home before my family. As I entered my bedroom, I heard 3 knocks on my sister's bedroom door, which is diagonally across from my bedroom. It was so loud that I thought maybe I had misheard it, and it actually came from the front door. So I sprinted down to the front door, opened it, and once again, no one was there. I checked the street, and no one was on the street. I went back upstairs after this and checked all the rooms. Nothing. I returned to my room and Snapchatted what just happened to the friends that knew about my situation during this time. I heard a squeaking of a mattress. It sounded like a child jumping on my mother's bed, so I shut my door and locked it and stayed in there until my mom and sister came home. I was terrified. If I hadn't checked the house already, I would have thought someone was in my house. Nothing happened again for about a month when I was downstairs home alone watching TV when I suddenly got into a terrified state. I felt like someone or something was watching me. After a few minutes, the feeling subsided and I calmed down and went back to watching the TV show. Out of nowhere, I heard a man's deep voice mumble something with 4 syllables in it. I was in shock because the man's voice was right by my right ear, as if he was telling me a secret. I reacted so quickly that I tweaked my neck in the process. I remembered the TV show where I heard the noise, and it was silent in the show. Who or what was saying something, and what were they saying? The last event that happened to me since typing this was when I was once again in my bed on my phone. My right arm started to have this burning sensation, which I couldn't explain, as I was sitting still and had been for a while, and my cats weren't in my room. I glanced down at my arm, and I noticed I had 3 scratches on the inside of my arm that were bright red, and I had another 3 scratches on the back of my arm that had just started to form. I don't know where they came from, but was left speechless. If anyone knows anything that can help me understand my situation, please comment. Any suggestions, no matter how small, will be appreciated. Also, the location of this isn't correct, but that is for a personal reason. This past December, I once again visited with my parents in Mozambique. Differences this time where my aunt was not invited, and I had undergone a big operation at the end of November and was not allowed to drive, so my parents came to pick myself and my kids up. Due to the fact that I had a lot of pain after the operation, my contact with my 3 resident spirits, Adam, 4-year-old who died in the house, Charlie, my guardian, and Gran, my maternal grandmother, had been affected. My medium friend Tim told me that they can feel my pain, and in most instances, it amplifies whatever pain they felt, so they kept their distance. I had little reassurances that they were there, little noises and so on, but no touches. Christmas week, we went to a lovely resort and stayed with friends of my parents. Or rather, they rented a beach cabin, and because they are all friends with the owners of the resort, managed to get it approved that we set up a tent to stay in the 5 days we were there. We literally only used the beach cabin for the bathrooms, which was a little uncomfortable as you felt like you were invading other people's space. However, we made the best of it. On Monday, the 23rd of December, one of the girls staying in the beach cabin, let us call her Mel, told her mother-in-law, who is my mom's friend, that while she slept in the loft of the cabin on Sunday night, she woke up to someone sitting down on her side of the bed. She felt the mattress give way under the weight of someone, and she knew it was not her husband because she was lying with her back against his. She said she was so afraid she just lay there with her eyes closed, too afraid to look until she eventually fell asleep again. Everyone who heard what she claimed laughed it off as a wild imagination. My mom and I just gave each other knowing looks, but obviously did not join in the conversation. I knew the first time I set foot in the cabin that I was not alone. To give you an idea of the layout of the place, you enter the cabin from the left. Upon entering, you have a bedroom with an ensuite bathroom directly in front of you. Next to it, as you proceed to the right, is an entrance to a bathroom, the downstairs bedroom, and the stairs that lead to the loft. It is built entirely of wood, and the roof is thatch. That is the entire cabin. The kitchen is located a few feet away from the cabin as your basic entertainment area. All reeds and thatch with low brick walls for support, but except for having a huge spider run around the table repeatedly while seated in the kitchen, which of course made the women squeal and jump on chairs or run out of the kitchen, nothing else happened there. The Sunday night, the 22nd of December, as I took my boys into the cabin, the first room upon entering, to take a shower, I was immediately aware of the fact that we were not alone. I also knew very well that both Gran and Charlie were with us, but the other presence I did not recognize. After my kids were finished, I sent them out to my parents and I got in the shower. From the moment the boys left the room, the feeling of being watched was immense. I heard soft knocks on the wall right next to the shower, which was just Gran letting me know she was there. But every night as I took my shower, I knew I was being watched. I also knew that Gran was with me and Charlie was outside the door. On Monday, we went to the beach, glorious weather, but it gets so hot there that by 9 a.m., you literally burn blisters on your feet if you walk on the sand. Mel and I were standing in the ocean with my kids playing around us when I told her that I believed what she said about someone being on the bed. She was astounded. Later that day, I contacted Tim and asked him what he could sense in the cabin. The feedback was, "This is not a nice entity, and try to avoid the middle of the cabin where the loft and other bathroom is, as this thing will try and get to you there." Luckily, I have ghostly bodyguards, and my intuition was spot on. I avoided that part of the cabin at all costs. Whoever this entity at least it never left the cabin. Needless to say, I was relieved to head back to my parents' place on Friday, the 27th of December. This story happened in Ghana when I was in high school around 2011-2012. I went to a boarding school, and the school was located in the countryside, if I may say. From the boys' dormitory is nothing but forest, miles and miles to the horizon. We all knew the school was very haunted. Those will come later, hopefully. And no one ventured into the woods, be it daytime or whatever. Although some stubborn ones venture, and all live to regret their decisions. This is the story of one of those guys. Let's call him Max. Max was seen as those athlete-type guys. Big body, tall, you know what I mean. He always said there was nothing in the woods, and he could spend the night there, blah, blah, blah. He got on a bet with a friend, and around 23 p.m., the set of to spend the night there alone. About an hour or so later, his scream was heard. He screamed, "Jesus!" Everyone was scared to follow up, so they contacted campus security, and about 8 of them came and set off to search for him. They found him, but he was unconscious. To date, 5 or 4 years later, Max has lost his ability to speak, and whatever he saw has also affected him psychologically. No one knows what he saw, and no one is ready to do a follow-up to the woods to rewrite history. Well, not yet, at least. To my main story. One night, obviously midnight, a friend, Mike, not his real name, woke up and started calling us to come see something. We sleep in bunk beds. His was right by the glass window, so he could see outside when he's in bed. We went to his bed, and what we saw, I can't understand until date. A giant ball of fire was jumping among 3 trees. These trees are not small, I mean they are huge, tall trees. They also weren't close. They were far apart, at least 100 meters between trees, and the flame fire thingy was just bouncing from one to another like it's no one's business. We looked for minutes, until the fire eventually disappeared, and we all went to bed confused. Tried to watch it again on several occasions, but it never happened anymore. At least, so we think. The story still haunts me today. I have 2 older sisters, and when we were younger, we stayed over at a cousin's home for around a month during our school vacation break. I was around 8, 10 years old at the time, and my sisters were in their late teens. The 3 of us were sharing a small bedroom which did not have a working light. I slept in the middle, with my sisters on either side of the bed. My sister, at the edge of the bed, suddenly woke us up in the middle of the night. She was terrified. Let's call her Sister P, Sister A, and I woke up wondering why she was insisting that there was a spirit which walked past her and into the room. We did not really believe Sister P at first and did not understand why she was so spooked. Sister A and I actually thought that it was some sort of joke at first. However, Sister P was adamant and just so terrified. It was midsummer, nights were very hot and sweaty. My sweat on my body suddenly turned ice cold. I felt the presence in the room, at the end of the end near a dresser. It was pure evil. I could feel it. I was so scared. I started talking to Sister P about it, and we both agreed. Sister A, who is the eldest and the least believing, also started feeling the same. I felt that it was a male presence, but a strong male. It felt stronger than a human male, something larger than human. I do not know what that spirit was, except that it was evil. We felt it so strongly without seeing it. We also heard its footsteps in the room. It was the scariest encounter I have ever had. We found out those family members whom we stayed with were not the best people years on. They dabbled in the occult. I have no contact with them now, as it is my choice. I am a pure, religious, God-fearing person, and although I believe firmly that no spirits can cause me actual harm, what scares me is the unknown. Why did that evil spirit come to us in that room that night like that? Why do we have these encounters and others don't? Please send your advice. I am a young adult from South Africa, and I have had many unexplainable experiences over my 20+ years of life. In this story, I will mention some of my experiences and leave it to you to decide whether or not they believe me. Either way, I don't really care. I first experienced the paranormal, if that's what it was, at a very young age. I would say around 6 or 7. One particular night back around the year 1998, I was at home sleeping in bed when I was half woken up by this loud buzzing sound. It's hard to describe, but it sounded almost like a massive swarm of bees. Only there were no bees. I was not the only one who heard it. My mother also had heard it as well. I should mention she is clairvoyant. Not only had I heard this sound, but I also recall having a feeling of being oppressed by this energy and also not being able to speak or move before being woken up by my mother. Now, I know many people will say this is sleep paralysis because I was not able to move or speak despite being conscious. But I assure you, I have had sleep paralysis many times, and this was not it. My experiences of sleep paralysis include being in a half-awake state, not being able to speak or move, but does not include me hearing loud bee swarm buzzing sounds or feeling a strong presence. In fact, the only other time I recall hearing a sound like that, accompanied also by chanting, was back in circa 2011, when I fell asleep one night while holding a cross in my hand while watching TV. The cross had been given to my mother by a client of hers for her to see if she could psychically pick anything up with regards to said cross. When I told my mother of my experience with the cross, she had told me that she had picked up that the cross had been used in magic rituals and possibly had a spirit attached to it. I have also many times experienced a feeling of something entering my room while I sleep, waking me up in the process, before being paralyzed and feeling the energy literally being siphoned from my body. I have had some other experiences too, but I will leave that for another time if I feel like writing again. I grew up in a suburb in Natal, South Africa, by the name of Westville. It is a small suburb where everyone knows their neighbors, and during the years that I was raised, I am now 43, most of the mothers were housewives. The only history I am aware of is that Indians used to reside there and have rice paddies. The rice paddies were then obviously developed. The properties were large and averaged between 1 and 2 acres. Our home was a modest one with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a lounge, kitchen, and dining room. When I was born, my folks decided to add a bedroom as there were now 3 children, me and my 2 older sisters. Their bedroom was added on the other side of the house where the patio used to be. Sorry about the boring semantics. I'm trying to explain how our bedrooms were on one side of the house and my parents' room on the other. Our house had a heavy energy to it for want of a description. We never closed our bedroom doors, and the passage light was always left on. My sister used to feel and hear dripping water on her bed, but when she felt the duvet, it would be dry. Nothing too dramatic that couldn't be chalked up to a child's imagination. I must have been about 12 or 13, and my sister was 17 or so. My eldest sister was overseas, but her bedroom was always kept open for her return by my mother. The passage door between our rooms and the rest of the house was closed. It must have been about 22 o'clock. The sounds of heavy footsteps started up and down our passage. It sounded like the person had shackles and chains around his ankles. As I am typing this, I am getting goosebumps. It truly sounds like a horror movie, and perhaps if my sister was not there to verify that this all happened, I would have questioned if all this really did happen. I called my sister to confirm that she was also hearing it. We were both too frightened to get out of bed. The sounds of the walking man must have continued for about 2 to 3 minutes. Then the most malevolent and frightening voice I have ever heard said "Nonu" from our bathroom, which was opposite my bedroom. I flew out of bed and ran to her room. We shared a single bed that night. All the windows were closed, doors locked, and my folks were asleep. I am still curious as to who or what the spirit could have been and why he was there. It was definitely a male voice and was not a friendly entity. There were other incidents at that house that other family members witnessed. I lived in that house from the time I was born until I was 21. I have since moved provinces and never felt the same fear as I did in that house. This story happened to me in Cameroun and is my first time sharing it. I hope I tell it right. I can't remember exactly how old I was, maybe 7 or younger. I am 25 years old now. My mom tells me this story all the time. Let me give you a little of my background. I am from Africa. I have 8 siblings. My family lived in the city. Every summer, my family returned to our small village which is a very rural place. We were in the village one summer. My siblings were playing outside. My mother came out of the house and told them she was going to visit a relative whose house were not too far from ours. As for me, I had fallen asleep on the kitchen bed. In the village, the kitchen is always built separately from the main house, and inside, there is always a bed or two made of bamboo. My mom came back hours later with some guavas the relative had given her for us. She gave some to my siblings. She then asked my sisters where I was to give me some as well. My sister told her I was still sleeping. She got worried and asked if I was sick because I had been sleeping for a long time. My sister said they didn't know. So my mom came into the kitchen to check on me. She called me and tried to wake me up, but I didn't wake up. My other siblings tried to wake me up. When I still didn't wake up, I am not a heavy sleeper. They knew something was wrong and called for help, which was mostly other people in the village. The hospital there is way too far away, and we didn't have a car at that time, so they couldn't count on that. Nothing had happened that day that would have explained why I wasn't waking up. I didn't have a fever or anything. I appeared asleep, that was all. Please keep in mind that this is a place where there is no doctor or medicine or anything, so you may find some of the methods used a little strange, but they are all true. They shook me, they poured cold water on me, and they took me outside, hoping the sunlight would help, but still no response. They poured hot sand on me and tried to make me inhale black pepper, maybe to get me to sneeze. No response. All along, my mother was calling my name and asking me to please come back. After a good 20 minutes of trying to wake me up, I was taken into the forest and held against a big tree, house to big red ants. After minutes of being bitten by the ants, I finally woke up. We all went back to the village. That night in our room, my sister asked me if I remembered anything of what had happened. It is hard to explain. It was like I saw everything they were doing to me, but from a distance. It was only years later, when I was a teenager, that I remembered where I was. I was in the yard with my grandmother. She is still alive. She was trying to take me with her, insisting I go with her, but wouldn't tell me where we were going. I remember the feeling of really wanting to go with her, but the sound of my mom's voice kept reaching out to me. I told my grandma to let me go see what my mother wanted and that I would be back with her. She kept insisting I go with her and see my mother later. But my mom's voice was just what I wanted to follow. When I left to go see my mom, I thought that's when I woke up. My sisters think it was a bad spirit disguised as my grandmother that tried to take me, and I would have died if I had left with it. They think that believe my family has had her share of paranormal experiences, mainly haunted houses, for years. But I don't know, I'm just glad I woke up that day. This story is from Mauritius. The story I am going to tell you happened 11 years ago, when my sister and I were still children. Before I start, I should tell you a bit about my family history. When my grandfather left my grandmother, she came to live at her parents' house. So, my father and we were all born and raised on my maternal great-grandparents' land. My great-grandmother died in 2003, and as Mauritian traditions go, they brought her body home for the funeral. Well, for those who are not aware, women usually bathe the body before putting on the clothes, which are, most of the time, the bridal clothes of the person. That day, my sister and I were both watching how they were bathing the body. Well, we were small, so we were very curious about funerals. Weird, isn't it? I know. I remember at that time, my mother strictly told us not to watch because it is bad omen. I stopped watching, but my sister, being smaller, she was 6 at that time, and more stubborn, kept watching. It's important that I tell you that at that time, my sister was ill. She is asthmatic and frequently has asthma attacks. So, as some of you may know, people say that when a person is ill or pregnant, they are very vulnerable to supernatural things. Everything went well at the funeral, but after 1 week, my sister's health began to deteriorate. She constantly had serious asthma attacks. She looked like someone who was about to kick the bucket, and we were all very scared. And 1 week after that, she began to wake up every night and cried that someone was strangling her. She even did the gesture with her hands, like you would do if someone was strangling your neck. The time that she woke up was 1 a.m., and it was like that every night. At that time, my grandmother, my mother, and my sister used to sleep in the same bed, as my mother was afraid to sleep alone with my sister, knowing that at any time my sister could get really sick, so she needed someone with her. One night, my grandma woke up to go to the bathroom, and as soon as she got out of bed, my mom felt like someone got on the bed. She pulled my sister closer to her and closed her eyes tight, but as soon as she did so, she felt like someone was literally pulling my sister away from her. She held firm, but it was very strong. My mom tried to scream, but no sound was coming out. But as soon as my grandmother came back into the room, that evil presence left my sister and went away. Let me tell you that when my great-grandma was alive, she was scared of my grandma, though the latter was her daughter. The battle between that evil being and my family continued for 4 months, with my parents taking my sister to every temple, every church, and every known and unknown religious place. They were so miserable and at wit's end that they even took my sis to witch doctors. I have no prejudice against witch doctors. I believe that while they are not so reputable in my country, there are good ones also. My brother was still a baby at that time, but he was completely neglected because of that. I had to take care of him, though I was still a child myself. I was 10 at that time. Finally, one day we got to know from someone that there was an old lady who had a boon. I forgot where she lived, but I still remember her face. She was a nice lady and was very sympathetic towards us after learning what we went through. We had to take my sis several times to her place, and then ultimately, we started to see an improvement in my sister's health. Allow me to clear something. She was not a witch doctor, just someone who got a gift from God. I know some of you may not agree to that, and I welcome your opinions. She didn't use black magic or whatsoever, only equipment like holy water, etc. Gradually, that evil being started to drift away from my sister, and finally, after 1 month, she was completely normal again. On the last day, the lady told us that if we had delayed in bringing my sister to her, she would not have survived long. The purpose of that spirit was to kill my sister. She also told us that it was indeed my great-grandmother, and she was not meant to die at that time, though she was very old. She died from shock. We knew the reason she got that shock, but it's irrelevant to the story. She could not accept her death, and she needed something to hold on to, and as my sister was ill at that time, she was the perfect victim. The reason she tortured my sister so much was because she wanted revenge, though we had nothing to do with her misery. She could not hurt the real people who made her suffer, so as a consolation, she hurt my sister. My sister is completely fine today. She is a 17-year-old teenager, leading a normal life, going to school, having fun with friends. When I ask her if she remembers what she went through at that time, she says she doesn't remember anything. I am happy about that because I want her to have a normal life and to be terrorized and scared all her life. This happened in Gombe, Nigeria. I was like 11 when I decided I wanted my own personal room. I have been sharing a room with my elder brother, who's 1 year older than me. I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment with my 2 siblings. My sister had her own room, me and my brother were sharing a single room, and our parents were having the other room also. It was a government apartment allocated to my dad when he was transferred to the state. There was another detached 2-bedroom apartment in the compound which wasn't occupied, so I decided to move there on my own. But the thing was, no one had ever lived there for the past 20 years until the day we moved, and it was renovated. I transferred all my things there and slept peacefully for about a week. The problem started when I got a stereo system, and I was listening to music on a high pitch almost every day. I started having trouble sleeping. I will sometimes wake up and can't go back to sleep. That's how I will stay awake until 6 a.m. It went on for like a week. And then one day I felt lucky as I was sleepy, so I went to bed early. I was awakened by an intense pressure I felt on my chest, and I was instantly knocked unconscious. I recovered in like 5 minutes, and I managed to see a woman sitting before me, but she wasn't exactly facing me. She was putting on hijab or hamar, and the way she was seated seemed like she just finished praying facing the Qibla, where Muslims face to pray. I closed and opened my eyes for like 5 times to confirm that I wasn't dreaming, and then finally my attention was drawn to a sound I heard beside me. Before I turned around, she was nowhere to be found. She just disappeared into thin air without any traces. I couldn't go back to sleep for the rest of the night. I covered myself with a blanket despite the unfavorable condition of the weather. It's during the dry season, extremely hot in the northeast. And this thought came to me. Probably the jinn used to observe her prayers in the house, and the music I played all day long disturbed her. That's why she decided to give me a sign. So I decided to get rid of the stereo system the next day. And from that day onward, I was able to sleep peacefully. I told my dad, and he told me that maybe it was the music that attracted the jinn, and encouraged me to pray more and consistently to avoid further encounters and also get rid of anything that has to do with music, at least until everything goes back to normal. This story is from Egypt. So it was a cold night in November. I stayed up late studying for my exams. I was only 16, and I made my own private room at the balcony of our home at 5th floor. In front of us, there were 2 buildings and a famous hotel with a swimming pool just in its 4th floor, where parties held every night, and people there keep dancing, screaming, and laughing until dawn, which I was used to it. But that night, at about 4 a.m., I heard a different scream. It started with a noise. I noticed that all lights of 3rd floor apartment were turned on and off so fast at one of the buildings in front of my room. And shadows of people moving fast. From my room view, I could see most of their rooms, so I guess there was some kind of domestic disturbance or something. I went back to study when I kept hearing a woman scream. I told myself, damn this hotel parties, it never ends. When I suddenly remembered that I saw it finished 1 hour later, another scream, help, anyone call the police, please. I didn't know what I'd do then. I was confused and couldn't think straight. So I just stood there. 2 minutes after, I felt a big shiver when I heard again this woman scream with a huge pain. My son. In a way, made my heart stopped. Everything stopped after that. Just silence. No more screaming, no noise. Later, I knew that she and her husband found their only 3-year-old son choked to death and wrapped on his own blanket and dropped behind the living room sofa. 15 minutes and police were all over in our street, closed it until 7 a.m. investigating everyone. All they knew was that a thief broke in while they were asleep. During his robbery, the little kid woke up, saw him, and screams. The thief held his breath and wrapped him tight to his blanket. Then went to the parents' bedroom, where they waked up already after hearing sounds, and threatened them to give him all precious things they had, including their personal mobile phones, or he will kill their child. After giving him all he asked for, they kept asking him where the kid was. He just ran away quickly. No one could catch or identify him. They spread his description photos and stuff. The night after, studying late as usual, I suddenly saw a fire on the floor just close to my feet, like a small flame coming out of nowhere. I cried for help and quickly spilled my big bottle on it, and it didn't go out. It just kept flaming for 2 minutes and vanished, just like that. The weirdest thing was that it didn't leave any burning effects after it. The curtains were just too close to it, and the carpet also. Didn't even get darker from its smoke. This strange flame kept appearing in my room every night at 4 a.m. for 2 minutes, and vanishing itself with no harm to me or any of my things. Even I didn't feel its heat at all. I felt like it was sort of reproach for me. that I didn't do anything to rescue him. I was so sad that I kept waiting for this flame every night for the whole week and didn't tell anyone and didn't even try to put it out. After a week, suddenly the flame stopped appearing. I knew later that the police caught the killer by tracing the phones he took from parents. The parents moved away after the accident, and I moved my room from the balcony. For a whole 12 years after, no one could stay at this apartment where he died. Every morning, I look at it and see how. Abandoned, dark, sad their apartment appears, and wonder just what if. Sometimes I hear her scream again late at night. Sometimes I see lights on and off again, but I know it's just my head, right? This story is from South Africa. My husband, our 15-month-old baby, and our 5 dogs, all POMs, moved into our new house in May 2020. This house was built in 1986 and was in really good condition. We started looking for houses after having too many security issues at the house we were living in, that house we built on a security estate 5 years ago. Our search started last year in September, and in November we came across this house. It was a deceased estate, and we were told by the real estate agents that he was old and passed away. The previous owner was a lifelong bachelor and had no family, so the sale was rushed. We put in an offer which was accepted in early December, but due to COVID, we were only allowed to move in May this year. During that time, we found out that the previous owner had committed suicide in his bedroom by drinking poison with his alcohol throughout the day and night until he died. The executor of his estate told us what happened. Anyway, we gather it wasn't an easy or painless death, and I just felt very sad and sorry for this old man that felt he had to end his life, and since he didn't have any family or friends, life must have been lonely. Prior to taking occupation of the house, we called our priest and explained to him what had happened. As Hindus, we do a prayer before moving into a new house. So our priest conducted an extra prayer for the previous owner, a prayer for the dead. We asked to live in peace and did cleansing, etc. The house is a beautiful house, and it had a soft, happy feel to it, and everything was going well. That is no supernatural activity. Then, in July, we decided to do some renovations. From week 1 of the reno, everything started going wrong. During the reno, we ripped out the carpets to find smooth, well-preserved cement floors. A few days later, the tiler arrives, and we find a giant foundation crack that wasn't there a few days before. So, we figured maybe we just missed it. Hard to miss though, because foundation cracks don't just appear overnight. Whatever the builders did, it would always go wrong. Could just be terrible work. But we relocated one of the bathrooms to another area of the house, and stuff would go missing to just be found where we had looked the day before. The wall tiles started falling off the wall. We actually fought with the contractors about this and accused them of shoddy work. They said this has never happened before and repaired the walls. The reno was horrendous, and eventually we told the contractors to leave with unfinished work because they would do stuff, and the next day it would be undone to everyone's frustration. During the reno, the dogs started to become afraid and act up. The house lost its sunny, bright demeanor. I put it done to all the terrible reno, upset the dogs and the house's good vibes. During the reno, the baby and I stayed with my in-laws, while my husband stayed with the dogs at home. We have now been a month without any reno, and the dogs are still scared. We completed the tiling by hiring a new tiler and finished the painting and small stuff ourselves. We have wind chimes, which I hung up in the passageway. I was told it removes bad energy and spirits when living in our old house. About a week ago at 2 a.m., the chimes started to chime away, ever so slightly and softly. I actually had to get up to listen carefully, thinking that I was hearing things. I wake up, go hold the chimes, and the noise stop. I figured it must be a draft from wind. I turn off the alarm, wake up the dogs, and take them out, also to check if it's windy. No wind at all. Next night, same chiming again. This time I go out and check again. No wind, no draft. I take the chimes off and leave them outside on the garden furniture. While all this is happening, the house now has a creepy vibe at night. So now we leave a light on for us and the pups. The baby refuses to point blank to sleep in her cot. She will sleep in it during the day, but at night, within 30 mins, she will be up screaming. One of our pups, who has been super protective of her, will growl and bark at something invisible while sitting next to her cot. We purchased a super king-size bed now so that the baby can sleep in bed with us. The dogs have their beds on the floor in our bedroom, or 3 choose to jump up on the bed in the guest room with 2 that sleep on our bed. 2 nights ago, at about 2:30 a.m., I woke up to one of the pups standing by the bedroom door, growling towards the passage. I sit up in the bed and can hear a faint tapping on the door in the passage that leads to the lounge. We keep it closed at night for security purposes. I get up and pick up the dog, and the tapping stops. Again, maybe the wind, or just an odd noise. A few minutes later, the door bangs as if there's a draft pushing it, and does this continuously every few seconds. Dog is now on the bed with me, growling. Baby and hubby were fast asleep. I get up thinking maybe a dog got left in the lounge. I check 3 dogs in our room, 2 in the guest room, the door still soft, banging. I open the door to check around, nothing, no wind, no draft. But the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. I go to the prayer room, I get incense and light it, all while chanting a prayer. Last night at 2 a.m., I woke up to my hubby talking in his sleep, his hands flaring as if pushing something away from him. Dog on bed, growling at hubby. Next thing, this little dog jumps at something in the air onto my hubby. He wakes up saying, "What's happening?" Doggy comes and sits down next to the baby, who is waking up. I get up to make baby some milk, and she and my hubby are asleep again. 3:15 a.m., loud bang in lounge, as if something large fell down, all dogs up. I tell them, "Get in your beds." I go to the lounge, check around. 1 dog is with me, checking as well. Nothing fell. We go back to the room. I decided to read Facebook, Instagram, etc. At 4 a.m., another large bang right above our bed, as if someone hit the wall with a hammer. Everyone is up now, crying baby, barking dogs, and hubby gets up. All dogs running around, barking, looking for an intruder. Nothing at all. Everyone back in bed. The extra protective pup just sits up on his hind legs on the bed, just waiting. He and I go back to sleep about 5:30 when we see some sunlight coming through. I'm not sure if this is my paranoia, or there may actually be something. The only time I have seen the dogs act so strange was a few years back at our old house when we had some activity. But then again, I wonder if they are just not still upset from all the Reno. Also, September will be the 1-year death anniversary of the previous owner. Wonder if the Reno paid him off. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions? Waiting to see what happens tonight. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this 1-hour series of scary and ghost stories, please give this video a like. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content next week. See you all later.